In today's video, we unearth Project Z, the once dead but now reanimated zombie apocalypse skirmish wargame from Warlord Games. Well, hi everyone, welcome to the channel and happy October. 'Tis the season for some zombies. So today we're going to talk about Project Z, the zombie miniatures game, skirmish wargaming in a post-apocalyptic Earth by Warlord Games. So this game was originally released back in 2016, but then I think it went on hiatus for a couple of years, but now it's back and risen from the grave. Warlord Games is actually reprinting it in what they call an extremely limited print run, and it will, quote, not be available again once sold out, unquote. So they started taking pre-orders last week on October 2nd, 2021, and I'm not sure when the product will actually be released, but no doubt they'll have that information on the Warlord Games website at some point. So when I first read about the Project Z announcement on Instagram, I believe, I thought to myself, I think I have that game. I actually purchased a pre-owned Project Z lot on eBay about 4 or 5 years ago, which included some painted miniatures and some expansions and some other stuff. But then when Warlord Games phased out Project Z, we put our copy on the shelf and kind of turned our attention to some other games. But now that Project Z is being reanimated, so to speak, to torment the living once again, I thought, well, let's take a look at that old 2016 version, which I think is going to be pretty similar to the reprint. So Warlord Games describes Project Z as a fight to survive in the abandoned streets of a post-apocalyptic world, infested by unnatural creatures hungry for human flesh. Survivors scavenge for scarce supplies while battling against the dead and the living alike. There are no laws, there are no rules, there's only the fight to survive. Warlord also says that packed with undead mayhem, the game is quick and fun, full of awesome models, hordes of zombies, and buckets of dice. In regards to the reprint, Warlord says that the actual game mechanics aren't really changing, though they may be tweaking a few things in the rulebook just for clarity and consistency. So after looking at the various pre-order bundles available on the Warlord Games website, it does look like Project Z 2021 will be very similar to Project Z 2016. So even though we're looking at an original version of the game from several years ago, it should still give you a pretty good idea what you might receive if you ordered a shiny new reprinted version. We'll also look at some extras that aren't included in the Project Z starter set, for example, these red and black dice sets. The starter set does include a pretty good collection of white Project Z dice, but just in case you want to have different colors for each faction, they are available. I think we got these on clearance after the game went on hiatus. So when I bought the Project Z starter set on eBay, the lot included this expansion set, this Male Survivor expansion set. And so this includes a few more male survivors, as well as some individual character cards, some unique character cards that are not included in the starter set. So we'll look at this a little bit later. The eBay lot also included a bunch of these Wargames Factory zombie and survivor sets. And these plastic figures are exactly the same as the figures you get in the Project Z starter sets and expansion boxes. They're just not officially sanctioned for the game, so there's no character cards in here or anything like that. Though you do get more figures in these Wargames Factory boxes, as we shall see a little bit later. And just to avoid any confusion, I should mention that our gaming mat today is from the Fallout Wasteland Warfare Red Rocket Scenic set, and our post-apocalyptic buildings are from Plastcraft Games. These are foam card building kits that are pre-printed with color graphics, so they're pretty handy. Okay, well, let's open up our pre-owned copy of Project Z from Warlord Games, and as it is a pre-owned copy, all of the tokens and everything have already been punched out. The previous owner also assembled and painted all the zombies and survivors from the starter set, so that's pretty handy, so we can show you painted versions of those. And they also provided us with some nice bonus material like the Special Forces miniatures up here on top of the diner. So no doubt they purchased the Project Z Special Operations Forces expansion box. And I believe the cards and the rulebook for Special Operations are actually in the starter set box that we received, though they are not originally part of the Project Z starter set. Alright, well, let's open up the box and see what's inside. And as I said before, I think this starter set here is going to be 99%, maybe 95% the same as the reprinted version. Obviously, I can't guarantee that, but based upon the photos I've seen of the new Project Z pre-order bundles, I think it's a pretty good assumption. So here's essentially what you get. The box includes 2 teams, so one team of like regular survivors and one team that is a biker gang, as well as a whole host of zombies, the rule books, the cards, the tokens, the dice, and all that good stuff. So we'll take a quick look at the game components, and then I'll show you some of the miniatures up close, and even compare them to some good old-fashioned Cadians for scale. And as I mentioned, this set I got from eBay actually included the Special Operations Team rules, so those were in the starter set box, but they're not normally part of it, so we're going to remove those, but we do have them in case we need them. Here is the 2016 Project Z Rules Manual, and it's only about 10 or 11 pages long, so it's a pretty easy game to pick up. And here is a second booklet, the Survivor's Guide for Dummies, and this gives you the guidelines for creating your team. It also has several scenarios in here, so most of these are player versus player, so you have 2 teams fighting for resources with zombies kind of in there to mix things up. But there's also a multiplayer scenario where you might have 3 or more teams, I guess, and then a solo scenario with just 1 player versus zombies. There's also 2 reference sheets, one for each player, and each of these has the game sequence on one side and the weapons summary on the other. Kitting out your various survivors with weapons in this game is kind of interesting because you can give each survivor either 2 one-handed weapons or 1 two-handed weapon. So one-handed weapons could be pistols, so they could have 2 pistols, or a pistol and a crowbar, or a single two-handed weapon like a rifle, or a chainsaw, or a two-handed fire axe, or something along those lines. So for example, you could give a character 2 submachine guns, one for each hand, and they'd be very powerful when they shot, but they would deplete their ammunition right away, and it's kind of hard to reload. The reloading sequence is somewhat arduous. On the other hand, if you gave them a two-handed weapon like a chainsaw, then they'd be very powerful in hand-to-hand, but wouldn't be able to shoot. So these are the sorts of decisions you have to make in the zombie apocalypse. Then, of course, there are proprietary dice for attack and defense. These are the white dice that come with the starter set. Then there's a plethora of cards. These are combat cards here that you can use to boost your attack or defense. That's a grit card there. Grit is extremely useful. We'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, you draw a certain number of these cards at the start of the game. And then during the turns, you use them at appropriate times. And then I think you get to draw new ones at the end of the turn. So those are the combat cards. These are the cards for the Special Operations Team who are not included in the starter set, but are available in an expansion box. Here are the Super Extra Elite Project Z survival cards that only the Special Operations guys get to use. The normal survivors and the biker gang don't get to use these. Here are the regular Project Z survival cards that come with the starter set, and these give your survivors or your bikers extra perks during the game, which might increase their survivability in the zombie apocalypse. Building a team in Project Z is actually pretty simple. First, each player picks a faction, and then all the players kind of agree on how many cards they're going to use each to build their faction, and then that number of cards that each player is going to use may impact the number of zombies on the mat or how quickly they respawn during the game. So for example, let's build a 3-card biker gang. So I'm going to start by taking 1 biker and companion, and then another biker and companion. And then for my 3rd card, I could pick Gang Prospects, which would give me 2 survivors on foot, plus 2 grit tokens. Grit is extremely useful to have, especially in emergencies, because it can allow a player to stand up if they've been knocked down in combat, or reload their weapon, or even finish off a downed opponent. But it's also very difficult to replenish, so you have to use your grit sparingly. And if you were just playing regular survivors instead of the biker gang, then this card would give you 3 survivors on foot with 1 grit token. This card, on the other hand, would give you 4 survivors on foot with no grit tokens. So you get 1 extra survivor, but no grit. So if you were just playing regular survivors as opposed to the motorcycle gang, you could actually get 10 survivors with 3 cards, as opposed to the bikers who have fewer people at their disposal but have more grit, as well as a couple of motorcycles which are always handy because they're fast. And then tokens, here are those valuable grit tokens. These are reload tokens. They have a single bullet on one side and 2 bullets on the other. So if you fire a weapon like a rifle, then you've got to put down a reload token and then try to reload in the upkeep phase by rolling a die and hoping for the right result. But then if you're using weapons that consume a lot of ammunition, like say a brace of submachine pistols, then after you fire them and probably dispatch your enemies, you got to put down the double reload marker and then go through the reload process twice because presumably you're digging frantically in your pockets looking for loose 9mm rounds. So these here are wound markers because some especially tough characters on your team might be able to take a wound before they have to roll on the injury table. And these here are the dreaded zombie spawn point markers, and they determine where the zombies emerge during the game. And these markers are double-sided because some scenarios have escalation, so at some point in the game, you flip the marker over, and all of a sudden there's an increased number of zombies to make your life miserable. And if I'm not mistaken, these are loot markers because supplies are scarce in the zombie apocalypse, so while you're fighting those zombies, make sure to pick up that can of Campbell's soup. Okay, well, give or take, that is the contents of the Project Z starter box, with the exception of the miniature sprues, because the previous owner of this set already assembled and painted all the survivors and zombies. However, if you were to purchase a new Project Z starter box from Warlord Games, you should get 2 motorcycles, 6 bikers, 10 survivors, and 23 zombie miniatures, as well as all the tokens, cards, dice, the ruler, and the rulebooks necessary to play the game. But of course, what would a tabletop miniatures game be without expansions? So Warlord Games will be offering a full range of expansions for Project Z. This is the only one we have. This is the Male Survivors expansion set. But as I may have mentioned earlier, I think these miniatures are exactly the same as you would get in the Wargames Factory Survivor sets. The big difference being you get 30 multi-part figures in the Wargames Factory box. These are 28mm, 156 scale. And in the Warlord Games Project Z expansion box, you get 10 multi-part figures, but you also get some additional special character cards that don't come with the starter set. So here are the male survivor sprues from the Wargames Factory box. As I said, there's about 30 figures in here you can build out. And since Project Z is kind of designed to be WYSIWYG, it's easier if you know what you want your survivors to be armed with before you build them. So if you want a guy with 2 machetes, or someone with a shotgun, or someone with a chainsaw, or a couple of Mac 11s, you can build them out, and then when you put them on the board, they'll be exactly representing what you have in your team. So those are the male apocalypse survivors from Wargames Factory. And here is the Project Z expansion set from Warlord Games, and since this is from 2016, I can't guarantee 100% this is what you're going to get if you buy the expansion set today in the re-release, but I expect it's probably pretty similar. So yeah, the Project Z expansion sprues look exactly the same as the Wargames Factory sprues, except you get fewer survivors. I think you can build 10 with this set. But in lieu of those extra plastic soldiers, you do get game cards. So here's some extra survival cards you can add to the collection from the starter set. You also get additional character cards to help build out your band of survivors. So here's some volunteers, here's the survivalist, the last family member, the cop, the preacher, the kid, some additional survivors, and of course, Chainsaw Mac. So I know there's also going to be a female survivor set for Project Z, and I bet those figures are going to be exactly the same as this female survivor set from Wargames Factory. Wargames Factory also offered a box of zombie vixens. I'm not sure if those are available as a Project Z expansion. And here is a Wargames Factory box of male zombies, which I imagine are pretty similar to what you get with the Project Z starter set and zombie expansions. All right, well, let's take a look at some of the painted Project Z miniatures that came with the starter set. So here are some of the motorcycle gang miniatures from the Project Z starter set. You can equip these with just a rider or with a rider and companion. The rider cannot shoot while he's steering the motorcycle, but if he's stopped, then both the companion and the rider can shoot. And then you have the regular motorcycle gang prospects on foot. They don't have motorcycles yet, and they're a little bit tougher, as are all the gang members, than normal survivalists, so motorcycle gangers have special rules for grit and such. And here's a good old-fashioned Cadian. He's joined the zombie apocalypse, just to give you a scale comparison. And as you can see, these Wargames Factory / Warlord Project Z minis are not heroic scale, so they don't have the gigantic wrists and necks that you would find with a GW type figure, but probably more proportionate to an actual human being, but it does make them look a little bit spindly in comparison to some other wargaming miniatures. And here are the Wargames Factory zombies as featured in the Project Z starter set. I think you get 23 zombies in the starter, though there are expansions if your zombie apocalypse requires more zombies. And obviously they are not heroic scale either, though you do expect zombies to be somewhat emaciated from their dirt nap. And then here are the regular Apocalypse survivors from the starter set. These are multi-part figures, so you can build them out to match whatever team you're going to be using in Project Z. And of course, once you had the Project Z game cards, you could certainly mix in Zombicide miniatures or figures from other games if you wanted to, just to provide some variety to your gang of survivors. And here's a closer look at the Special Operations team for Project Z. These figures do not come with the Project Z starter set. This is one of the expansion boxes. And as you can see, the Spec Up guys have been joined by a couple of Acadians for this mission. They're kind of wondering who these guys are with their thick necks, thick wrists, and their las weapons, but they're happy to have the help. Okay, folks, that is our look at Project Z, the 2016 zombie apocalypse game from Warlord Games that is now being re-released here in 2021 in a limited run. So if you're interested in that, hop over to the Warlord Games website and check it out. And as always, thanks very much for stopping by and checking out today's video. If you like the things we do, please subscribe to our channel. We'd really appreciate it. And give this video a thumbs up, which helps us with the mighty YouTube algorithm. We'll be back with another video before you know it. But until then, watch out for those zombies.